In other news, the federal government is stepping in amid a slew of complaints to try and reform how New York City's big jails treat adolescent inmates. U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara says since he issued a scathing report based on violence against adolescents on Rikers Island, New York City has been eager to institute reforms. Still, the Justice Department is joining the lawsuit, seeking changes at the jail. The announcement came the day after the city said 16 and 17-year-olds are no longer being punished for rule breaking by being put into solitary confinement. Bharara says that is great, but that is just one of the dozens of ways that young people experience violence in Rikers. Well, with all of the history happening right before our eyes with Cuba, we thought we would take a break from what is happening now and turn back the clock and remind you what happened on this weekend throughout American history. As Gary Franchi will tell us, a lot of big things happened right around this time throughout the years. Gary?
That's right, Midge. We're starting things off at the beginning, just 1 year after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. In 1777, General George Washington led his army of about 11,000 men to Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, to camp for the winter. Fast forward 173 years to 1950, and another general and president in the making, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was named commander of the military forces of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Then, in 1961, former U.S. Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy Sr. suffered a debilitating stroke while in Palm Beach, Florida. He was 73 years old at the time. Of course, you know him as the father of John F. Kennedy, widely considered the patriarch of the powerful Kennedy family. 11 years later, Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific, officially marking the end of the Apollo program and manned lunar landings. Flash forward December 19th, 1974, Nelson Rockefeller was sworn in as the 41st Vice President of the United States in the U.S. Senate chamber by Chief Justice Warren Burger, with President Gerald R. Ford looking on. This was the first time in U.S. history the whole thing was televised from the Senate. Then back in 1998, hard to believe it was 16 years ago, President Bill Clinton was impeached by the Republican-controlled House for perjury and obstruction of justice. He was later acquitted by the Senate. Midge?
Thank you, Gary. It's always nice to look back and see how far we've come. Back to today's news. More people than ever are talking on their cell phones, but they aren't just talking, they are banking, and it is presenting a major problem for big banks. The Wall Street Journal reports for the first time ever, customers are now interacting with their banks more through mobile devices than by any other means. Banking by phone now represents 35% of total interactions, more than any other type, more than branch visits and even ATM. The Bain report also says that banks that go all digital do so at their own peril and for a good reason. Digital-only customers scored lower on loyalty scale than those who visited branches or ATMs. Some new advice from health experts who say that you would be a little nuts not to consider adding more almonds, peanuts, or walnuts into your diet. They say not enough Americans are cashing in on cashews, almonds, peanuts, and other popular nuts. A federal study shows about 38% of American adults eat nuts daily, and that is usually in the form of peanut butter. The ideal level of consumption is about 1.5 ounces, equal to about 240 calories. Previous studies found that small portions of nuts, which are calorie-dense and high in protein, are often associated with decreased obesity, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes. Well, it's no wonder that squirrels always look so happy. Well, if you're heading to the airport, do not check your patience. You are going to need it. They say this year, the Friday before Christmas, is the busiest travel day of the year. With lower jet fuel prices and airfares already a little higher than last year, overhead luggage space will be at a premium on the busiest travel day of the holiday season. According to the trade group Airlines for America, A4A predicts that about 2.5 million of us will take to the skies. The airlines have geared up for the increased demands by adding bigger planes and more holiday flights. Well, it's less than a week until Christmas. It's true, I'm afraid, and it's already the middle of Hanukkah. And ready or not, the stress is beginning to gnaw at you. Many studies show that a cup of cheer is often replaced with a cup of fear or anxiety. But believe it or not, there are ways to beat it. The holidays are supposed to be joyful, peaceful even, but they are often the trigger for a mountain of stress. Psychology professor Dr. Naja Riley says, if you want to be happy, ditch the expectations and embrace imperfection. She recommends that you look to create traditions, but don't worry about comparing them to other ideas that you see on Facebook or on Pinterest. Speaking of the holiday spirit, it's a sweet story from a Walmart cashier in New York, and it inspires dozens of others to give back. Jenny Carpin was new on the job, and she was just recently hired to work the cash register. And earlier this week, an elderly man came through her line, and when she rang him up, he realized that he didn't have enough money to pay for his whole transaction. Embarrassed and confused, he started to sift through the rest of his groceries to see what he could do without. But instead of sending him away, Jenny reached into her purse and pulled out $40 to cover the gap. Now, $40 might not sound like much, but it is no small amount to someone who works a register. And it didn't go unnoticed. It was such a sweet gesture that everyone in line tried to pitch in and help out. But Jenny told them that she couldn't accept their money. The deed was done, and store policy does not allow her to take their money. Instead, she encouraged them to go on and try to help someone else out along their way. Such a nice way to spend the holiday season, doing good for someone in need.